Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, where the mind and gym come together to help you live your best life. Hosted by two fitness professionals and your personal trainers, Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie. Here we go again. Today's topics: ins and outs of scientific research, pelvic flooring, and big batch meal prep. Before we get going, we got weekly workout, and we'll save our food for thought for the end. Weekly workout. Menchie's going to approve this one. I wrote this one a couple days ago, and I'm really proud of it. Start off with a superset, and what you're going to do with this superset is you're going to do one of Menchie's favorite moves, a barbell step up, kettlebell step up, dumbbell step up, whatever, You're going to do some high reps there, and then you're going to hop down and you go to a heavy lower repped barbell RDL superset. So it's a step up into an RDL superset. That's your first order of business. Second order, oh man, I was in a superset mood apparently. Think about this one.
Crushing the supersets.
Front squat, superset with lateral lunges.
Oh,
yeah, just hitting painful.
Hard leg day.
Yeah, pretty much. And then the last one is actually, we're getting some PAPs involved there. So for being athletic, we're getting some power movement in there, and we're supersetting to get the use out of the prime muscle beforehand. So we get barbell RDL superset with barbell step-ups, then front squat superset with lateral lunges, then back squat superset with box jumps, and then you end with 3 sets of walking lunges to failure supersetted with crunches. So it's pretty straightforward workout. You could even do that one body weight if it could be that challenging for some people. You know what I mean? Just having a step, standing up on it, and then using just like your body for barbell RDLs or something. But yeah, so superset everything, guys, and shorten your rest periods in between the two exercises, but break between the rounds, meaning don't take your time going from the step ups to the RDL. Like take your time, but hurry up, if you know what I mean. But after you've done a full bulk set between the step ups and the RDL, then you can rest. Preparing for the next round.
I love the superset. Oh, supersetting's great.
I love it with the lower body. I love pairing different movements with the lower body into, like, I would even do lateral lunges into the front squat myself sometimes, just because how good it feels for like the activation. And yeah, I love the walking lunges to failure.
So would you go front squat right into a lateral lunge, or a front squat, do all the reps, then go into lateral lunge?
So I think for this workout, I wrote it as trying to make it digestible, and it's much more digestible to front squat than go into the lateral lunges.
That's what I would do. Yeah. Just wanted to clear it up. Sometimes people do. That'd be more of a complex, though.
What?
If you did a front squat, lateral lunge, front squat.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely times where I've done that, gone the lateral lunges before the front squat. And there's also times where I've done back squat into dumbbell walking lunges, and that's fucking miserable. But yeah, I just want some good stimulus on the lower body. Get that time under tension. Work the glutes in all different ranges in planes of motion. And I love making people do walking lunges to failure. I just feel like it helps clean up a lot of neuromuscular issues that go on with the body, especially coming from the feet, from the ground up. Yes. It's like all of a sudden like feeling things, getting tired, and because you're really pushing yourself to failure and forcing your body to have to do its job right, or else it's not going to be efficient in getting to failure. And so that leaves us into scientific research. And I think it's really important to talk about because there's just so much that goes into a headline. And a lot of people are swayed by headlines and news headlines as kind of like clickbait, but then they can have some bias and some truth to them. So we wanted to shed some light on the perspective of being skeptical about what you're reading in these studies, about digging further, asking questions, and then remember that it's about what you take from it in the end of the day, not necessarily what the study is trying to tell you that you need to take from it at the end of the day. So between funding, agendas, abstract thought, causation and correlation. Menchie, take us away. Where do you want to begin?
Let's start with studies and news articles.
Okay.
Because I think it was a couple weeks ago I sent you one that caught my attention because I see these articles now that I'm reading a little bit more news, and it was like um, exercise scientists say one 23-minute workout a week is nearly as effective as three. So
Well, science says it. It
great
means it's got
science,
to be true.
So I got to read this because now I'm like, I feel like a lot of times we get into these 23-minute or 30-minute, like one time a week and you're good. So, I mean, the article was well written, goes on to say the comparison of consistent working out versus like a 23-minute high intensity interval training session, and went on to say that you can get the same results from a 123-minute workout, which is totally true. But people need to be aware of how they word it in articles. Articles will say stuff like, they'll kind of leave it open ended. So it makes you think that one workout a week for 23 minutes is all you need to do.
Yeah.
And so then when I take these articles and I always go back and look at the study because I have to read the study and what the study's final conclusion was. And in this one, the study was really well done. It was basically comparing high intensity training for 6 weeks compared to your average training 3 to 4 times a week base aerobic work. And where it did show there's improvements within the 23-minute workout group, but it
Right.
said after a long outcome, so after 12 months, the regular hit demonstrated beneficial weight loss and visceral fat reduction, but it also showed a decrease in participation over time.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
so basically, it was a great study, showed results, but it showed that exercising for long durations of times for many groups is a challenging thing, and people get bored of it, and I don't really want to say bored, but they just don't want
They
to do
get
it anymore, and
stagnant
they
with
stop
it. Yeah.
exercising. So rounding about back to the ins and out of scientific research,
Real quick, what was the population group that they selected for this study?
what was the
They have a
population group?
size, the size, the population size.
102 participants were in the high intensity interval
Okay,
training.
so it's a pretty big
So
group
yeah,
study.
it's a big group, and they showed majority of it was falling off six
Yeah.
months, and then 12 months it was kind of like unadhered.
Yeah, it's a really important point to address when you're talking about like your workouts, and it's kind of like the injury analogy. It's like, well, you can work out super hard, but if you get yourself hurt, you're not gonna be able to work out for like the next
Right.
6 months. If you're gonna write a workout that's only gonna last you 3 weeks before you get tired of it, or you're not gonna do it anymore, then what good is the workout for you? So that's why we always talk about programming and um, periodization and then random periodization, tactical periodization. There's so many different ways to adjust variables and create a control setting environment so that your body can notice what you're trying to put on it.
Yeah.
But
And the study shows there's exercise is beneficial. And a lot of studies we're not really, scientists aren't out to prove that you only need to do an hour of exercise a week or a month
but
to be
they'll but
healthy.
they'll but they'll take that
Correct.
thing that they found and they'll warp it into a sentence that creates clicks, really.
Exactly. And
And
it gets your attention because now people start to think the less I have to do, am I going to stay healthy? And once most people start reading studies, I mean, studies are lengthy. There's a lot of verbiage in them. There's a lot of numbers, standard deviations. It gets confusing. So I don't expect people to go and read full studies, but at least
but at least
read.
take this into
Yeah.
consideration.
And
Yeah.
especially on the other side is the nutrition studies. nutrition studies are, I mean, there's thousands of them out there.
and
Thousands.
they're usually a little bit more politicized. So like back to the clickbait aspect of scientific research, it's because like a lot of these labs don't get that much funding for conducting these tests, and then when they do come up with findings, that's kind of like their way of proving more grants and getting more funding for their research. So they will use clickbait as a way to grab people's attention because that's the world we live in. It's the 24-hour news cycle. It's it's, stimulants in the morning, depressants at night. Like we're just go go go. So it makes sense why if that continuous clock is moving of information, that they just kind of put something out there that lights up in people's eyes and attention that grabs them. But like Menchie says, it's important to remember all that's going into the study. Um, Not you can't just attach yourself to the headline and be like, "This is fact. Why isn't this working? How do I make this work for me?" You just have to go into it knowing that they're going to provide you with quick and easy answers so that they can get their article read. And
Correct.
yeah,
And
and
I guess
then sorry, go ahead.
no, I would say that's a great way to start is when you first pick up a study or I pick up a study, the first thing I'm looking at is where it's done and who sponsored or funded it.
Yep,
Because I've read some studies and and I'm kind of ashamed that I've heard this, but Harvard, actually I guess Harvard, I forget what actually company it is, but they get um grants and funds from, I believe it's a plant-based company.
okay,
So what's that going to say? It's they're going to promote studies that show findings for plant-based nutritional studies and findings because they're going to
yeah,
get 50,000, $100,000 in grants and
right.
awards for doing these studies. So you got to be really careful on what some of these universities have for funding in coming in. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, they've funded so many studies trying to reverse the effects of sugar.
I was just gonna bring that
It's
up.
just
Like,
unbelievable.
and that's in the past. So imagine what's going on now.
They're
But
still probably
so
trying to do it.
it's so true about where the funding comes from. Like I
Mhm.
remember it was like a Chris Rock skit, and he was like, "We should have all politicians just wear jackets like NASCAR racers. And that way we know who backs them, and it'll be
Exactly.
easy." And it would be a lot easier. But it is funny how you really have to figure out like what are they, and you can almost reverse engineer it. You can say, "What are they trying to promote?" Okay, let me try to figure out who they could be backed from, and you can even check yourself and go guess and go look at it.
Correct.
But more often than not, like I think the most um, informational science and studies that I'll read personally, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this too. Um, I feel like when I'm reading a good article, it's because they're not coming to conclusions. They're not making grandiose statements. It's usually the fact that they said something like just what it was. They just explicitly stated like, well, in a double blind controlled study, we were able to show that mice regained their memory. That's it.
And
And that's that simple fact that they found, and
yep.
they're not trying to extrapolate saying
Right.
like a drop of Coca-Cola can regenerate brain neurons. Like, wait, really? And then you still got to start to
Yeah.
look into it, and right. Um, so yeah,
So
back to what you were saying though about how the Coca-Cola sugar industries it gets politicized. Is they'll buy funding essentially, or they'll some companies do this in pharmaceuticals. They and it's not even illegal. There's a whole Netflix documentary about it too. We should check it out. But I'm just gonna brief on this rant real quick. How they buy research and development or buy companies and then just remove everything they want and keep like their research and development that they found and then like spin it in the way that they want. So it's like a mafia type move.
it was like giant cherry picking.
Yeah.
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 And I think that's where I'm going to go next with the research is cherry picking. And it is unfortunate. It can be done. I could pull a research article right in front of me and cherry pick some things, and everyone does it. And it's fine. You're kind of supposed to because there's good information in the studies. But if you're cherry picking something from an article and the study doesn't support that, then it becomes a problem. or the study just disproves something or proves something different, but there's just a piece of information lying in a study. And it's unfortunate that a lot of documentaries on Netflix, Amazon, anywhere, they will, depending on what their agenda is to push their ideas, they're going to cherry pick information from documents and research articles to support their findings and what they think is optimal. And that's another thing you got to be completely careful of. I believe it was last summer. I think it was the American Heart Association came out with a study that said all meat is bad. Very
Oh,
vague, but basically saying that red meat and chicken and white meat alone was all increased risk factors for early mortality, which,
it's
okay, the study showed that. And then that's fine, but then you have to look a little further because that's a just study that could be just observational data. So they asked what? Okay, let's say they asked me and you and 30 other people what we ate for 10 years, and they sent us a survey 3 times a year, and we just jot down what we go. That's where some studies can go there, and that's fine. It's observational, or just kind of gathering data, and then you track these people, what their health style is, what their life is like, and then you get numbers at the end. That's one way that research can do, but it doesn't paint a full picture of what we're trying to do, because now we have to throw in some of the healthy bias and the unhealthy bias. And if you take a healthy bias, so take people, you and I, or healthy people who work out every day, eat healthy every day, if you put them on, let's say, a diet with good amount of vegetables and fruits and moderate meat, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, and you study them for a year, I would probably argue that you're going to see some positive health stats. And then if you want to extend it out for 30 years, living a healthy lifestyle, we've gone over this with the blue zones and the centenarians, like they have quality of life increases. It becomes when you have this unhealthy bias that get thrown into the studies, people are still eating processed foods with meat. So one of the big things in one of the studies showed with the meat that the people were eating meat consumptions were eating it with processed food. So they were eating burgers, they were eating hot dogs, they were eating all this stuff with the meat that we know causes cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes and hypertension, and all this stuff can that play a role into it.
yeah. And especially in terms of like a longer framework, if you're zooming things out, because yeah, it'd be really easy to see trends if you zoom really far in and see like, oh, a spike in glucose even in a minute, right? But you have to then extrapolate, and like Mike's saying, is like think the bigger picture and think about long term. And if those initial results that they're talking about in that study are still going to be true after a long term application, or if they're going to kind of fade away, or if they become negative, who knows? And I think it's just really important because a lot of the times it's almost like this will sway the public so dramatically with a really aggressive headlining, such as like all meat's bad for you. And what the other one that came to mind around that same time, I feel like was that one that was a headline out of oh man, I don't want to be incorrect, but I feel like it was out of a school in Massachusetts, and they were like, all coconut oil is evil. It's the worst thing you could possibly eat.
Well,
And it
that
was
might
like,
have been Harvard.
what might have been too,
I
right?
think so, yeah.
And it was just like so grandiose, so crazy, so like out of the blue, when like there's been so many studies recently showing how fats are good for you. And it was like a last ditch effort, I don't know by who, I'm not going to make any speculations, but to try to fight the fat movement. And it's a shame that it becomes politicized, and we almost get used as like herds of cattle, who will move left if they are told to go left, or move right or told to go move right. And I think an underlying part that Menchie isn't explicitly stating is you have to take everything with a grain of salt, and you have to remember you're trying to get information for your system and how you swallow it and how you digest it. Because I think a lot of times it's like It's like a personality trait
It was
to kind of
Harvard.
like it was for
It
the
was.
coconut oil
Yeah.
one. Yeah, it was them again. So
Coconut oil is pure poison, says Harvard professor.
you can't always trust every headline that comes out of a notable
Yeah.
publication,
and
unfortunately.
and that's where I have fun reading research like that, and there's research that is definitive, right? You know, you pull out a designing a resistance training program book, and it's going to say, hey, they did the study in 1985 with 3 sets of 10 reps compared to a study with 3 sets of 6 reps, and this is what we saw: strength increased, volume, like definitive stuff. Nowadays, I think you're right. I think there's more people trying to prove something to the general public to whether sell a product or sell something, rather than to say, hey, this is what's best for our human organism systems to eat, and this is where we need to be going. And it can be very challenging because there's a lot of different pulls out there. I mean, you have the keto
Oh,
world,
totally.
you have the carnivore kind of world, you have the vegan world. They're all of them can be good, but there's no one right one. But if you take a
It's
stance, you kind of have to say, hey, this is what I think, and this is what I believe, and this is what I'm going to go with.
it's literally like there's food and then there's just really extremes on that food front. There's the person who eats only plants. There's the person who eats only animals. And there's pluses and minuses to both of those. And it's it's our responsibility because we have that higher level of thought, right? We can psychoanalyze and better than any other animal. So if you just want to be like a dog and you don't want to think about this stuff, then you probably want to turn this podcast off. This isn't for you. But if you're gonna think and you're gonna make, you know, thought out decisions, you'll know that like those are just the extremes. Those are like your outliers. And there's a happy bell curve of where you should lie with your diet in terms of how to figure out foundationally what you should be eating more of and how to figure out how to adjust your diet so you can live longer. I mean, there are people who already do it. That's what's funny is so many people just want to look at the American food system, but if you look at like blue zones as a whole, there were people who already culturally for a long period of time have been living to 100 with their lifestyle and with their diet. So we can tell you kind of we have an idea, like the public, the scientists, not just Menchie and I, can tell you a general idea of how to maintain your health. And I think what happens is it's like what came first, the learned helplessness or the overbearing instructor? You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's like the kid who wants their mom to make something for them or their mom that's always willing to make something for their kid that doesn't prevent any growth, right? So it's the same thing with studies. It's like I think there's just this huge uneasiness about not knowing something. And that's what this field is. It's about continually trying to get more and more layers of the onion, get more and more perspective, and you have to accept that you don't know. But when people aren't comfortable with not knowing something, they have to go get the answer, and they think it's out there. They think it's on this publication or this scientist is gonna what they tell them or this study that's gonna come out, and they attach to it. So I'm afraid that if you're stuck in the mentality of like I just need to go find what I'm looking for, you're never gonna find it because it's already with you. You already have what you need to know basically.
And that's why studies are so good on our end, because it shows how, like, studies show how certain movements affect the body metabolism, certain nutrients affect metabolism and stuff, which is all good. And as we're reading research, sure, you've read it and I've read it, further research needs to be done on certain things, further research needs to be looked into more. People are still diving into studies as we speak to find things, and I think that's great. But we also have to take in consideration the group being studied, who were the subjects, how many, and then how can this apply to yourself? And then
And I think
there's
that's
studies out there that don't have agendas, and those are the really good ones. Those are the ones
and
that are badass.
that's what you want. You want to
Yeah.
be able to think about it. You want to be able to have some type of abstract thought about it, some creativity around it, and see how it stamps on your personality because there's a neuroplasticity. You already bring something to the table. You don't have to just be voompt by all the information that's sent your way. And I think it is important to have just basically abstract thought after every study. Maybe think about other questions, and that's what school I feel like did for me. was helped me be a life learner and ask questions and be scientific in that regards. And yeah, the only other thing I want to say about scientific research is it's also important to remember that correlation doesn't mean causation. So when they do a study where um, they add olive oil to everyone's diet and their heart rate or their blood pressure dropped, right? You can say, yeah, the it's better to say that they observed a noticeable difference after administering olive oil in through the diet versus saying like olive oil is the exact reason why your heart can drop, because there's plenty of other variables that play a role into
Correct.
it. And you have to remember that all like the population base, their starting point, and what they're looking for, because someone who, yeah, you just don't want to get caught up thinking that everything is cause and effect relationship. There are correlations, and sometimes they're even just for the study and just in that particular setting.
And
And
it doesn't mean it's wrong. I mean, that's a great. Let's take your example. So some people would are looking for this. If they hear that, they'll be like, okay, well now I have to go eat olive oil all the time because it's a magic pill. Okay, fine. If you want to do that, it might the study might need a little bit more into just pure olive oil. But if you look at the study and say, hey, we saw improvements with people taking in extra olive oil a day. I want to know what those people were doing. Were they eating healthier diets? Were they exercising? So now you take, because fitness health isn't this just one thing. It's not like I take 3 fish oils and I'm good. We this is what we kind of stand for. It's everything
I
combining
wish
into
I could
this
just take
one thing.
vitamin D and fish oil every morning and be good, but
It's like
not that easy.
you integrate all the systems to be healthy. So on the exercise side, are you doing the right things? Yes. On the diet side, are you eating the right things? Yes. Are you doing the right things for sleep and meditation and regeneration? Yes. If taken into consideration and I read that study, I'd be like, okay, correlation shows I'm going to add in some extra olive oil to see how I feel. And
Totally.
if it shows that it helps, boom. But I have to be doing the other things too to get that same effect.
Yeah. And I mean, I would think that you're probably a lot different than the normal population, but I think there are plenty of other people out there, and we're hoping that they're listening to this podcast that do little self experiments like that and have sort of treat their system rather, treat themselves rather as a organism, as a system, as a host of trillions of cells and bacteria, fungus, viral, all different types of cells. In fact, I think only like 6% of our genes in our cells are unique to humans. The rest of them are in every other organism type of
Yeah.
deal. So it's just, if you can treat your system as a whole like that and zoom out and be that third person for yourself, it's going to be, you're going to be more honest with yourself, and you're not going to be as anxious or as fearful if you don't know something, and if you just read something and you think you need to start it right away. Just start to, again, treat your body like a system and know the different mechanisms Menchie was talking about there, like your hormonal system, your neuromuscular system, your lymphatic system, your cardiorespiratory system, and there's more. But um, without just going too much into scientific research, let's segue into pelvic flooring now, because we've already told you to take everything with a grain of salt, and now it's time to get some exercise in. So before we get going on the rest of our chapters in terms of mobility and stability and deadlift, squat, bench, we're going to really literally go from the ground up. So we're doing pelvic flooring today. And I think it's super important because I think a lot of people miss out on the pelvic flooring. I think a lot of people can do the dead bugs, but then lose out on the pelvic flooring in a loaded exercise. And, you know, only thing is I want to mention real quick before I'll let you define the pelvic flooring a little more, is it's like we have our hips, and there literally is a big hole in the middle of it. And if we can get our pelvic flooring on, it'll support our spine from underneath, as well as light up the rest of our abdominal cylinder, just help stabilize and keep our spine in a neutral position.
100%. When people think pelvic floor, they don't really kind of know, like, intake
Like,
that
what
word.
is it?
What is
Yeah.
it?
Right.
So, and I think you did a great job. It's literally a group of muscles that are literally the underneath of our hips on the bottom hole. It creates like this. It's basically like a drum, right? Boom. And if those muscles are in
I
a,
like that. Okay. Yeah. It is
essentially,
like a
it's a
drum.
drum.
Yeah.
So, and if we're out of sync, what happens? A drum doesn't play the right tune, the right music we want, or it doesn't work at all. And that's where we're talking pelvic floors. It's important because pelvic floors are basically what hold us up. With gravity pulling down, we have 2 feet on the floor. That pelvic floor helps us stand. It helps us move air. It helps us keep our organs in together. It helps us when we're talking lifting. It helps us squat, deadlift, lunge, you name it. And when people are finding limitations in the squat, mainly the squat, usually it's a pelvic floor issue or a pelvic floor that's not in the right position to function. And with improper pelvic floor, I don't want to get too deep into what can go wrong, but we can, without proper control of a pelvic floor or strengthening of it, we might not have a strong back. We might have a anterior tilted pelvis. We might have back pain. We might have neck pain. We might have a more kyphotic posture, all because the pelvic floor isn't in the correct position. And the pelvic floor, we're one system. It's got to influence the rib cage on top, and the rib cage on top will influence the pelvic floor below. And if either of those are out of position, and then we go exercise or do something repetitive on it for thousands of reps, we can become dysfunctional, problematic, and have injuries and pain.
And then treating it as a system further, meant you went from top down, bottom up. If there's something wrong with your feet and unable to get your proprioceptors activated properly for your adductors on the insides of your legs, sometimes that can be pelvic flooring issues too. So, like from the ground up, it would be feet, adductors, pelvic flooring, whole abdominal cylinder, and rib cage, all in one unit. And that's your core stabilizing your spine.
So when you bring up, like, okay, we're going to work on pelvic floor stuff, people don't get it because some people can feel their pelvic floor muscles contract. Most majority people will not be able to. It's not like squeezing a bicep where they're like, hey, I can feel this thing on. They're not going to feel that. So they're conceptually, it can be hard for them to be like, what's he going to have me just do some holds or stuff? But
You want to go into some cueing real quick?
you already brought up the muscles that we're going to target to hit a
Okay.
pelvic floor.
Okay.
I mean, adductors are going to be like the gateway, the road to creating a pelvic floor because they help. So when you adduct your legs together, they help open up your pelvic outlet. So if they're closed together, some people adducting the legs will help open it and activate the pelvic floor.
Yeah, and I just wanted to throw some more language in there. I guess that's why I was excited with the whole
Go for it.
cueing thing. But I think it's important to try to visualize this thing and throw different language at people because you never know what it is that clicks. Like, oh, that's what they're referring to. So, like, I think as Menchie's talking about the muscle, what it's doing too, it's also helping you uh, keep holding a fart or holding a pee when you got to pee your pants because you got to go so bad, or when you're having sex, or when you laugh and you have to pee and then you pee a little bit. That's pelvic flooring issues, people. And a cue that I'm going to steal from another trainer. He was like, squeeze your glutes, and now I want you to pretend like you're pulling a nail out of the wall with your glutes, and it ultimately pulls your pelvic flooring on when you think about it.
Man, you're,
So
you're firing away the pelvic floor muscles, and we're not even
yeah,
talking about the pelvic floor muscles. I love it, but
but you're right.
that's
You're right, and that's another important tool is that it is a chain, and something can
Mhm.
be wrong in the chain that can be unable can also prevent you from being able to tap into that. So we've defined it. We've talked about it being kind of the area underneath your hips, or for those of you with little kids, earmuffs, real quick between your uh, anus and your private parts, male or female. That's kind of that area, and that's the area you're trying to engage. And sometimes you have issues with your rib cage or your feet or your adductors that's actually preventing you from getting to that pelvic flooring to begin with, that Menchie was about to bring up.
Yeah. Or could the look at the other way? The pelvic flooring could be causing issues with feet, with collapsed arches or ankles, all that stuff. It's two-way road. And I think a lot of I want to go back to, when you were talking about glutes, because you're hitting you're hitting everything where it needs to be. You're not going to just be like, all right, we're going to do pelvic floor contractions. No, we need to target big muscle groups that are going to influence position of a pelvis left and right to create new positions to engage the pelvic floor muscles.
Like the
And that's
squat, the
that's the big
deadlift.
key.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you can get a glute to influence and pull a hip forward or back, or an adductor to turn a leg in or out, without them knowing, you're targeting their pelvic floor through position of innominate bones, so hip
Their
bones.
hips.
And I tell
Yeah.
people your pelvic floor is just the bottom of your abdominals. So think you have abdominals coming from the rib cage down. I need something to close your system off. It's not just a hole in the bottom of your hips where stuff's just going to drop out. Like if you don't have those muscles underneath on the bottom of your hips, you're useless. So those are your
Really
bottom of
use.
your abs. When your abs contract because you exhale, your pelvic diaphragm should move too with it because you're moving organs and everything else within your body cavity. So it's very important, especially for stance and running. If you have a pelvic floor issue or one side might be tight, one side's more descended, then you might not be able to properly stand on a right or left leg. Now you're going to go sprint and possibly run a marathon. I can only imagine what's going to happen to you when you get into mile 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So it's important. And I don't need people to go to the gym every day and be like, okay, I'm going to work on my pelvic floor. But I want them to think
No,
about when they're squatting, are my hips in the right position to allow
totally.
air and allow my pelvic floor to move up and down, to contract and relax in a proper position so I can gain movement. And with mobility, if the pelvic floor is not in optimal state of movements through side to side, forward and back, mobility and stability is going to be thrown off. If you can't, if you're not hitting a low depth squat or just can sit in a squat position, most likely it's probably going to be a pelvic floor issue, not letting your hips fully move and get into that position and let
Articulate.
air fill that pelvic floor and you can sit comfortably in there. And that's where some people don't understand that when it comes to mobility. You can stretch a muscle all day long, hamstrings, quads, fine. But if you don't have proper function of airflow and rib cage and hip position, that pelvic floor will never release. You might never hit a low squat. And I have clients who've had issues with, okay, they get maybe 90 degrees on a squat, but they can't go any lower. Their active legs straight leg raise is fine. Their hips are, it's more just getting them to breathe into that pelvic diaphragm and move air into posterior rib cage down so they can feel what it feels like and gain that range of motion. Because if not, you're
Yeah.
just going to hit bony stops or your hips are in a position you're not going to be able to go any further without compromise.
Yeah, and I think it was really important how you mentioned that it's not the end game. Where we're talking about pelvic flooring and educating and drawing light and awareness to it, but we're not trying to say that this is like what you need to do 5 days a week or even spend an hour doing. It's just something that needs to be on, and you need to always be checking in with it anytime you're in a loaded squat, anytime you're in a loaded deadlift, even if you're in a bent over barbell row, even if you're in a barbell press. You need to be making sure that you're checking in with what's your pelvic flooring doing and what's your core doing and what's your air doing. Is that limiting you? Are you caught up on your breath? Are you losing your core every time you gasp for air? There's different little ways to address things based upon what feedback signals you find and learn from your system and your body. So I think, like Menchie said, it's just about something that you are addressing when you're in your strength routine and when you're doing those bigger body
And
movements.
I'd say you're all right on that, but I'd have to disagree with one thing. Technically, you're working your pelvic
What?
floor every single day. And we
Ah,
so and
gotcha.
you said it, and I was like, I
Touche.
know I know what you
Touche.
meant. Like we're not focusing on it like every single day with iso.
Right. You're not going in for like pelvic
But I'm
floor
sitting here
day.
and wait a second. Technically, because then you followed up with exercises, and I'm like, well, no, if you're doing lunge, squatting, deadlifting, and I was thinking of dead bugs in my head or front plank, you're always working, if you're in the right position, you're always working at that pelvic floor position with diaphragm position and rib cage position. So it's not like
But
you have to isolate it like a
the,
bicep curl or arm day. You're
right,
always kind of using it,
right.
but we just want to be more aware. I know you're saying you're aware of it and thinking about it.
And maybe that's a little bit of what I'm used to seeing
Oh
because
yeah.
I usually find like people will do like a Pallof press and can't find their pelvic flooring, and I'll be like in a half kneeling position, and that's when they can find it, and then they go tall kneeling, and then they go standing. But it'll be like you have to take that step back to take this two forward type deal.
Oh, and that's great. And that's let's break down why that can happen. Just so like I mean,
Okay,
because
yeah,
and then
let's start
then we'll
off with
move
a
on.
Pallof press.
So it's like
Yeah.
standing payoff press. People can't they can't find it, which is hard, right? Because now we're back to our
Real quick side note: Pallof press is you're standing perpendicular to the machine and you're offsetting a cable or band wherever it's anchored to. You're perpendicular from it, and you're exhaling and pressing it away from the center of your spine. So it's anti-rotation.
badass exercise. It's great. Standing is probably the most challenging one, but I like it. Like if you can't feel that on a standing one, instead of having them keep going and be like, oh no, we'll try to find it, you drop them down to what'd you say, half kneel?
Half kneel.
Because sometimes bilateral movement or bilateral hip position can be more challenging for people if they're standing. So now we're talking back to your floor up,
Yep.
like we got to use they're on both feet. Their both feet might not be proprioceptive, like talking to the brain, be like, hey, we're both feet driving grounded through the floor.
Right.
So they might not even be grounded, and they're like, I have nothing.
Yeah,
So what do you do?
and
You
usually it's because their hips are out of line because they're in an anterior pelvic tilt when they stand because they're used to having really tight quads. They're used to sitting all the time, and they can't find their. I probably stepped away from my mic, but they can't find their core. Like they can probably sometimes people will find it like a little bit, but if they have no
the
pelvic
top abs.
flooring,
Yeah,
yeah, right, the top abs exactly. They
yeah.
won't really feel it at all. If they have like some pelvic flooring to no pelvic flooring, top abs or none at all, and then I usually just get them down into a half kneeling position, and now they know what I'm trying to feel when they go back to that standing position. And despite all the cues that we just said through this whole episode, you'd be surprised that you could still say all those cues to people, but before they actually felt it and the click saved on what it's like to feel like, they none of those cueings did anything for them. So it'll be like I'm thinking of one person in particular, and once I got her into a half kneeling, it like clicked, and she's like, "Oh my gosh!" She has a physical therapist as well, and she does Pilates sometimes. She's like, "This is what they were talking about." It was just funny, and I just think
What clicked for her? What
half
did she feel? What
the half kneeling pelvic flooring because it was like forcing her to stabilize those hips, forcing her to keep that pelvic flooring on, and she could feel her lower abdominals.
did she say any certain muscle that she felt or with the stabilization? Did something just
Obliques,
light up? Really?
obliques.
Did she get glute too?
Yeah,
Yeah. So like I think like the half kneel is great because you put the knee down, you can hit that glute. I mean that glute max and
yeah.
glute me. I mean those are game changers. And once someone can feel and find those,
That's usually a
you
helpful
get them
point.
upright, and it's like
Helpful point.
boom, hey, there you go.
Yeah,
So
very.
I mean that's a great progression and regression to go through to help someone find and feel muscles that they might not know how to turn on
That's another
while
important
in an upright
point that
position.
you highlight is the glutes. Glutes playing a big role.
Very
Glute
important.
activation. So improper glute activation can be lack of your pelvic flooring too. So that's another important part.
But I mean, that's all I got on the pelvic floor for this one. I think we're ready to rock into meal prep ideas and how we get into good behavior patterns and how we sustain that through meals.
So I like the idea of big batch meal prep for a lot of different reasons. Whether it's someone who doesn't want to spend too much time in the kitchen, or someone who gets bored of the same routine of cooking and cleaning every night, or you're prepping your lunches for the week so you have healthy options, or you're prepping meals for the kids, whatever it may be, it's helpful to do big batch meal prep, not only for yourself in your time for the week, but also for your peace of mind and for your time. You can enjoy it more with your loved ones rather than cleaning things. So a lot of these recipes, you can double batch, triple batch them, and I have a couple in mind that I know are my go-tos for me that I'm going to mention. I know Menchie has a couple, and the other thing too is like I've taken some of these recipes and double, triple batch them, and then frozen half of it, ate the other half, cook something next week or week after something. Like they usually last for a good month, and then I'll pull it out later, and it's like fresh. Like it's not like it tastes bad to me, and it's not like it's stagnant because that can happen if you eat if you ate a big batch meal every day for a month, you're probably gonna get sick of that eating that food. It's true. Um,
Agreed.
there is a
Yeah.
level of not being slave to your taste buds. And I did want to mention that before we go into the big batch meal prep because Menchie was actually kind of my first for that. I I had a really clean diet, but I was a little bit of a sugar addict, and things needed to taste good and savory and sweet. And I remember one of the times in particular, you were like eating a pepper, and you were like, I can even. I was like, you can't even taste the difference of that. You're like, I can tell the difference between all the colors. Watch, and you like, we would close your eyes, we'd give you one, and you would do it. And I did the Whole 30 diet by Melissa Hartwig, which is just an elimination diet, which we're gonna address in further episodes. And it wasn't until I did my first elimination diet that my acuity, my taste bud acuity, really increased, and I was like, really, like my palate just got so much more vibrant and diverse, and like it was amazing how like even eating something like a plain pepper, like it's even make my mouth water right now, and I could start to tell the difference between like an orange or a green or a red. So I think that does that's a little disclaimer I want to throw um, into eating in general before I just dive too deep into nutrition. So batch to big batch meal prep. My first one off the bat is a disclaimer included oatmeal recipe, which is it's like oatmeal, nutmeg, banana, and cinnamon. And you can just look up like cinnamon oatmeal recipe and figure out the ratios. And I put it in the instant pot, and it comes out so good. It's like a it's like a warm cinnabon with oats, and it's just so good. It's so good. And sometimes I'll drizzle
The
maple syrup on that. This was like when I was really lifting hard. So I don't do oatmeal anymore because oatmeal is high in omega 6s, and I have a bad gut. I have bad gut permeability, so I'm definitely one that's prone to more leaky gut and things like that. So I don't do oatmeal anymore, but that is a good one for people who don't have issues.
the only the only and I'm the same way. I used to do oatmeal all the time and I don't do it anymore. The
Why
only
don't you do it?
thing um I was getting some GI symptoms,
Okay.
some like bloating and stuff, and I went on an elimination diet and realized
Oats.
it was probably the oats that was creating a lot of it. So I just changed it. Just changed what I was eating. So just more white rice and sweet potatoes now.
Nice.
But the other thing is the way you cook it. When I had the Instapot too, it was fine. If I couldn't cook it enough, I believe it was the lectins that were killing my system.
Yeah.
So when Matt's talking about an Instapot or a pressure cooker, that's probably the best way to cook oatmeal.
And foods in
I,
general because it will break down the lectin.
right.
The only lectin it can't break down is gluten. Gluten is a subcategory of a family called lectins, and gluten is a type of lectin that just can't be broken down by instant pots. Unfortunately, because
But yes, I mean,
everyone's first thought when you say that food is free is a fair game if you throw it in the instant pot, they're like, "Can I put a loaf of bread in the instant pot?"
yeah, see what it turns into. You're probably not going to want to eat the mush. Good, throw it out. But yeah, for even stuff like beans, and I can't really do a lot of that stuff because of the lectins.
Same.
But if it's on the Instapot, it's a little bit better on my system because it breaks down the lectins more. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like it's not as much a disruptor. You just get some gas and a little bit of bloating.
correct.
So, do you have an instant pot or a big batch meal prep idea that you do for breakfast now, other than oatmeal?
I do. I do like sometimes I'll do the egg bakes.
Okay.
So I'll make scrambled eggs and put in. I'm not big into like whole leaf spinach. That's a story for a different day. I mean, I like it, but I need it ground up
What
because I almost choked on a piece once.
and what about
So it'll
throwing
be
some
like
mushrooms in there?
peppers, onions, ground spinach, scallions. Throw it all in, mix it in, bake them. And if you're really on the go, I mean,
Yeah, it's a little
you can
breakfast
bake it
bar.
into yeah. I or I'll bake it into like a almost like a quiche dish and
Yeah,
just cut it, and then you can have it on the go.
I used to do that too. Actually, make like a big quiche, and I would just take a little square out, put it in the microwave for 10, 15 in the morning. Oof, yeah,
Yeah,
it's good. It's good. And if
I
you're
I haven't done one in a while. I might have
I
to
might have
go
to
back
too.
to
I'm
it.
thinking about it. I really am because I used to get creative too sometimes, and like as long as you're getting good source meats, I would put like bacon in it, or
Hmm.
sometimes just turkey or ground chicken. Um, but yeah, that's getting me kind of hungry. That sounds pretty good. So okay, another instant pot big batch I have is a chili, and it's just like a nice big batch roast. I just do two different type of beans. I pick I think fava beans and either kidney beans or black beans, but they're try to get creative there. Cannellini beans is what I use. Using a lot of Italian cooking, and then I'll actually take some fresh tomatoes and I'll boil a little water, drop them in, take the skin out, get the seeds out. But you can also buy them now where they take the seeds out in or just like a can of stewed tomatoes because again it's going in the instant pot, so you don't have to be too worried about the lectins from the seeds or the skin. But tomato sauce, peppers, um, and then obviously you can look up for chili, cumin, and there's another seasoning, salt, chili, cumin, and salt, and then that's usually comes out for a nice big chili. Oh yeah, I throw like a ground chicken in there or ground turkey in there to make it throw some protein in there, and that usually lasts me a while. Those are usually meals for the week, and then some to freeze.
Yeah, chili is always a very good thing because you can throw a lot of stuff in it. Like sometimes I'll even throw if it's going to be a post workout meal, I'll chili rice and some veggies in there, and boom. I mean, you can kind of put whatever you want. Some people like other veggies in there.
And
You can
sometimes
kind of make your own.
sometimes I'll just make a big batch of rice too for the week, and I'll just make like a huge thing of rice, a long grain jasmine rice that you rinse thoroughly before, and then once it's done cooking, chop up some cilantro, juice a little lime over it, and it's good rice. It's versatile throughout the whole week. Again, you can freeze some, and it goes with the chili. It'll go with some of these other big batch meals. And it's just nice to have like a thing of rice sometimes is a good base to go with like my leaves and vegetables and throw a protein and olive oil and balsamic on it like if I'm on the go. um I do have two other big batch ideas, and then I don't know, do you have any more that you want to talk about?
I was said kind of one stemming off the chili is, and I kind of heard this from one of my friends, one of the trainers, and he kind of rotates his big match meal. So one week it'll be uh, like Mexican week. So take the chili, but he'll be like, oh, I'll do like either he'll do shaved steak or kind of like cut up steak or ground beef with some beans and like a taco salad, and he'll have that for all week. Other weeks he does like a Italian chicken dish, and he has that with potatoes.
Ooh,
So there's definitely meal options to do, and you can change them up each week if you're someone that needs something different.
yeah.
I'm really not that good of a role model because I eat
No,
literally the same thing, but some people need that variety, and I think it's very good to have.
I think I think personally, I definitely do variety after a while. So it'll be like I can do something for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, and then it's like okay, next week's got to be a bigger meal of something different. That's it, and that's why I like doing big batch meal prep because it's usually right around I'm hungry for something and I'm trying to catch that hunger at a good spot and give myself good fuel before it gets to a point where I'm starving and I'm just going to eat any and everything that my brain thinks of. And that's usually what
Yes.
people get to. And it's usually much more primal. It's usually linked to a lot of like their memory of food. Like I remember, for example, I took my dad on a hike, and this was like when he was in his weight loss journey, and as part of our retreats. So I was getting him hiking and cooking meals for him and stuff like that. And at the end of one of these hikes, which I made him go into a fasted state for, he was like, I need chuckles. I just need chuckles. And he was like kind of upset. And he was just like, it was like frantic. It was just like, I need chuckles. I need chuckles. We got to get chuckles. I'm like, what are the fucking chuckles? And then like we cool down, we get in the car, we drive home, and he's like, man, I don't know what happened. I was just like craving this candy that I had when I was a kid. And it was chuckles. And I thought that was just kind of funny is that you can definitely be the animal and let primal cues take over, or you can be more methodical and let your put your best foot forward for your animal, taking care of your organism, taking care of your animalistic instincts. So another big batch meal prep. um, I love doing this one too, just chopping up like 2-3 carrots, chopping up 2 or 3 bags of fingerling potatoes, and then a big thing of mushrooms. I like different varieties. Throw that all in the instant pot, maybe slice up some ginger, throw some turmeric on there, and throw like a big chuck roast on it, or a big tri-tip. Yeah, and then yeah, I see Menchie's face, and then so it's on top, and then you put
Man,
all
I'm
the
hungry over
salt
here.
and the seasoning on the meat on top, and then I pour in usually like a beef broth or a mushroom broth, and then set that and forget that, and it comes out so fucking good with the meat falling off, and like, oh, it's just like a big stew. It's a big pot roast. Um,
That's it. And I love the set and forget because that's something with an Instapot or if you have a crock pot or a slow cooker, you just put it in there, let it go for 4 or 5 hours. You can do whatever you want in that time. You don't have to be like hovering over a grill or, waiting by a stove. I mean, that I utilize that often on Sundays so I can literally just throw stuff in and I'll come back in 6 hours and it's done.
Same, same. It'll be like a morning thing that I'll do. I'll like actively be doing something for 20 minutes, and then boom, the rest of the day I'm just chilling.
Mm.
And yeah, it does feel like literally one of those things where it's like, shit, if I can do it, anyone can do this. Like I used to be the guy that would like fucking take the Hormel chili top off, put it on a fire stove, and turn the thing on. You know what I mean? Just make sure that the
Yeah.
the wrapping was off the can. Like let it sit on the fire stove. It's going, it's cooking, it's bubbling. Eat a little bit out of the top. Okay, sprinkle a little bit of cheese in there, and then just eat it right out of the can. Like I would just be so like, it's not lazy necessarily, just not having the mental bandwidth or the preemptive knowledge to think that far ahead. But like when you're starving, you're like, oh my god, I just got to eat something. So last,
Because even
go ahead. I was gonna say one more.
you go last
All
one.
right, I got
You
one
go
more,
last one.
one more big batch, and this one's more of an Asian spinoff. So I usually use chicken for this. I usually get bok choy. I get ginger, garlic, and sesame oil. And I usually put the Instant Pot on saute mode first and put the ginger, the sesame oil, and any other spices you want in there right then and there, right? You can put garlic if you want to. It helps bring out the flavor. Sometimes I'll even put lemon zest at that point, help bring out flavor. I'll throw turmeric in there too to help with my gut and be anti-inflammatory. But again, chicken, bok choy, ginger, and then also throw in some mushrooms and just make like another roast, usually with like a broth or just sometimes water this time, and then I'll actually it depends. Sometimes I'll do it with a whole chicken, and then I'll just like go to town on this whole chicken, or I'll just shred it and just have like chicken breast and just shred it and make like a uh, shredded almost like an Asian ginger. I don't know what to call it, bowl. And
Works.
that's it for my big batch meal. And I know we still have our food for thought left, pun intended. But I'll let
Wow.
Bench you go ahead and wrap up for us.
Especially with the big batch meal prep. you come home from a long day, the last thing you want to do is cook for 30, 40 minutes to cook a piece of meat or that. And I'm totally in that same boat. So it's great to have something already prepared that you just need to kind of reheat for maybe a couple minutes, or like me, just eat it cold and you can do whatever you need to and enjoy the night. So these strategies are for you to have more time to do the things that you enjoy in life rather than spending it over a stove or endlessly cooking and then you making bad choices because you do not want to do that every single night. I get that. So it's a very good option for that. And then just finishing, just people out there would be please beware of research articles and science articles coming out. Do your due diligence and really read the article to see what it says fully. And if you still have questions, feel free to reach out to Matt or I with these questions. We're more than happy to answer them
Just make
on
sure
this
you link,
podcast
make
if
sure
we
you
get a
link the
lot.
study that you're referring to in the email.
Or yeah, or just go over what we find from the study and what the article might say different. So we're always kind of leery on that. There's good science information coming out. Just because it's out on the news doesn't mean it's 100% true for your person. So always ask questions. And then we're always continue to be upright and move left and right and squat and be able to. And that's all pelvic floor stuff. That is human movement. We want to be able to keep it going for quality of life.
I'm going to end with our food for thought, and this is by Edgar Allan Poe. Believe half of what you see and nothing of what you hear.
Oh, wow.
Good application.
Great quote.
Good application for the ins and outs of the scientific research, for um,
A lot of things
yeah, and then life in
in the
general,
science world.
in the science world, and trying to figure new things out for yourself. So that's our food for thought and our episode this week. So this is Eric Menchie and Matt Gluckman, your personal trainers, signing off. Take care, guys. Thanks for listening. We hope you gained something from this episode. Our mission is to help people live their best life, both physically and mentally. Check out thinkfitnesslife.com for additional resources and schedule a complimentary assessment with one of us. We're always here to help.